Hey there, it's Nick Terzo, and this is the Radical Podcast. No, we won't be overthrowing any governments, but we will be learning from radical creatives who rule the world. Hi everyone, welcome to this week's show. My guest today is Uber film music supervisor Stephen Gizicki. Steve is a Emmy-nominated, Grammy-winning music supervisor who has worked on films such as LaLaLand and In the Heights and many others. He supervised the TV miniseries Fosse Verdon, which he was nominated for an Emmy. And he also ran music at Lucasfilm for a few years. Before we begin, I wanted to pay my huge respect and mention the passing of composer Ennio Morricone. This man was such a complete genius. During my last couple of months in quarantine, I had the chance to rewatch the classic westerns, Once Upon a Time in the West and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And his music score just slayed these films and really altered what film score would become. The opening in Tarantino's Hateful Eight just blew my mind. Didn't even know it was Morricone at the time, but when that music locked with a visual, it was utter perfection and could only be Morricone, and eventually went on to win the Oscar for the Best Original Score. So, rest in peace, my fellow Italian. Your legacy lives in eternity, and you changed how the game is played. So, coming from this leads to my chat with Stephen Gazicki, where we'll discuss narrative, storytelling, visuals, and music. Enjoy. Hi, Stephen. How are you today?
I am doing very good. How about yourself?
I am well. Thank you for taking time to sit with me today and have a little chat.
You're very welcome.
I've been wanting to speak to you for a while, even though it's only my second podcast, but I will. There were many years ahead of that. I have so many questions still, even though we've been friends forever. So
it has been a very long time. I'm not even sure.
Yeah. So how are you how are you doing work? I mean, production, everything's still shut down, right? That's kind of where it's at.
Yeah, everything is shut down. I was working on shooting a film in New York, right when the world went sideways. So I escaped from New York and came back to LA. And it's been a bit of a waiting game since then, and a lot of conversations regarding what the go forward is. And making plans for the relaunch of several of my projects and how we might navigate that and what the world looks like and what we can and we can't do. So it's a lot of sort of just guesswork, I guess, and looking towards various recommendations from the SAG and other unions to see how we can make things work.
Right. I mean, can productions in theory that are shooting outdoors work? I mean, instead of in a soundstage? I know it doesn't help you with being in a recording studio, but
yeah, in theory they can, and it's I've been having a lot of conversations, and I'm on a few different projects, all varying in scope right now, and each project poses its own unique problem. In the Heights, we're in post, and we're trying to restart the mixing process, so all of that would be based on a mix stage, and how do we navigate that, and how many people can be there. Tick Tick Boom was a musical that I was on in New York, and that was in front of the cameras. And while New York is restarting to the point where soon we can begin shooting, and actors can do their thing, and everyone's broken out into pods. Everyone has their own little group that they have to stick to. Singing becomes an issue, which is, of course, that's my department. It is not advised that actors sing full out at one another for obvious reasons.
Yes.
Spit and everything else. So we have to figure out how do you make a musical in this environment where people need to be singing, and then beyond that, when luckily Tick Tick Boom is sort of a smaller musical. It doesn't have the grand scope of In the Heights, where there are like 500 dancers singing and dancing at any given time. To
How
keep
much
moving.
of that had you gotten done recording wise, like in the Heights per se?
Everything. We actually, we were finishing our last score date as New York shut down. And I was sitting at the scoring stage and just watching, obsessively looking at Twitter and CNN and everything else and listening to Mayer's conversations. And over the course of that day, it became clear that everything was going to shut down and I had to get out of New York. So we wrapped the session and then I got on a plane home the next day.
Incredible.
And luckily we had recorded everything. So all of the material is there. It's just mixing it now. So we were really lucky that, God, had we still had recording left to do, which I know I have friends on several other productions that still have a lot of recording to do. Those are hurdles that we don't have to jump over.
Wow. All right. Well, I want to jump back to both of those a little later down the road because they're both kind of fascinating projects. So I don't want to just skip over them because of COVID.
So we're on the pandemic chapter of our conversation.
Yes. Lucky us. So tell me, so you're in LA. That's where you reside. You've been there for years, but you're a San Diego boy. Yeah, that's where you were born, raised.
I was actually born in Michigan, which perhaps you may or may not have known. And my dad was transferred when I was a kid, like 11, I think. And we went to San Diego at that point.
Got it. That makes sense. What'd your dad do?
I can still say that I'm from Detroit. That gives me a certain amount of street cred.
Yeah, that's a ton of street cred.
Well, it's actually it's interesting, and I was Detroit, and I just not to sidebar for a second, but I had these two uncles when I was growing up in Detroit that were very much into 1970s the music of Detroit, which was MC5 and Iggy Pop and all that stuff, and they would play it in their bedroom, and I was a wimpy kid from the suburbs, and it was like that, them playing that music to me at 9, 10 years old, like changed everything, and then that was kind of the spark. And then moving to San Diego is when it sort of, my love of music took hold.
Right. With the great flagship of 91X down there. Did that have any influence on you?
Oh, no, 91X was everything.
Yes.
And I became that kid that my first job was in a record store, Licorice Pizza.
Licorice Pizza.
Rest in peace for that wonderful chain. And I was this weird kid growing up in San Diego that was just obsessed with British music. If it didn't come from England, I really wasn't so interested.
Yeah, that's my first impression of you. So I was always.
Oh, really?
Well, and though I was an A&R guy, and had some reference points of musical history, and I was always a little intimidated by you because I thought you were much more encyclopedic in your knowledge of music, especially, on the UK front or alternative music.
I don't, thank you. And for me, I don't know where it came from, I guess, but, I read all the British magazines when I was a kid. I read, everything from like from NME and Melody Maker to the more poppy stuff like Smash Hits. And if I started to like a band, whether it was a Bauhaus or whatever, or The Cure, and then, I'd read this article and the band members would then describe their influences. So then, I need to go back and learn about television or Kraftwerk or whatever it was. So I just had a curiosity as a kid. I have no idea where it came from.
No, and San Diego was like this bubble, having kind of gone to college there and started my career there too. That you could actually promote bands like The Cure and like the Thompson Twins, and they could sell out arenas down there where they couldn't do that anywhere else in the country.
Like Depeche Mode might as well have been Bruce Springsteen in
precisely,
San Diego, or LA with K-Rock, and which is so interesting that the two sunniest climates so just openly and enthusiastically embraced the doom and the gloom of British New Wave.
All of it. It was the Alarm. I mean, it was crazy who came through there, and they had huge audiences.
Yeah, and I back in 1983, 84, you would see tour schedules for Tears for Fears and Depeche Mode or whoever it was, and you'd say, "Oh, New York, LA, San Diego," and that was it. They were like they kind of didn't go anywhere else.
Well, then on top of that, you had KGB there, which was one of the great, hard rock stations in the country too. So you have these two really formidable radio stations in different formats down there. Not that you ever listened to KGB, I assume, but
oh, I did. I always.
Right. Did you do your college there or not in San Diego?
No, I went to LA.
So you came to LA. Where did you go to school?
UCLA.
So that's what brought you to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And were you a good boy and you graduated?
I was a good boy and I graduated. I was a history major, which makes really not much sense. But
you were?
It was what it was.
What was the plan for that?
It was
poverty or what?
Poverty and naivete. No, my dad was a history nut and a trivia nut, and so he instilled in me this love of history and facts, and so that it fascinated me.
I can understand that. That makes sense. And then out of school, what did you do with your history degree?
Forgot everything I learned.
Did you go? I mean, what was your first music industry job in Los Angeles?
Yeah, well, UCLA had a radio station, KLA, so I was a program director of the station. I was a DJ for a while, and then a program director. So through that, I started doing internships. I interned at Chrysalis, Long Last Chrysalis, for a while. As at UCLA, in one of my courses, I was in class with Peter Asher's wife, Peter Asher, the manager.
Yes.
And manager and producer. And I immediately after college went to work in his management office. I mean, it was, I just, what a amazing stroke of luck to have fallen into that,
He's a lovely, lovely, talented man. So.
Oh, absolutely. And and it was, because I didn't, I knew that by that point I really started to focus. Okay, I really want to be in music somehow. I'm now figuring this out. And is management maybe part of it? Because I'd done stuff at record labels, which was really interesting. And here's an opportunity to work in management. Is that what I want to do? And the sweater didn't fit me all that well, I guess. And I ended up befriending someone that was that worked at Virgin Records. And I was told, oh, well, there's an opening in the mailroom or whatever it was at the time. And so I left Peter's office and went to work at Virgin.
Okay, and that's where I met you. Yeah. You are the dear Danny Goodwin.
Yeah.
And you were doing marketing there primarily after the mailroom, and you were in the marketing area?
I actually, an opening came up in radio promotion, which, I didn't even know what that was, really. So and the first full-time job was in radio promotion, and I was in radio promotion for an assistant in radio promotion for a couple of years, and then I moved into marketing as a product manager.
Nice. And I know a very special person you worked with while you were a product manager. Who were some of the people you worked with, though, other than this very special musician and artist?
A very special person. I got to work with Smashing Pumpkins, Lenny Kravitz, Rolling Stones, Tina Turner. But you're alluding to David Bowie, who I ended up working with very closely for a couple of years.
I am alluding to David Bowie.
Yeah.
So, tell me about that. I mean, that's just fascinating to me, and I don't think I've ever worked. Maybe some artists at that level, but he's just legendary. So, tell me a little bit about that.
It was. You ever sort of look back at your life and you think, wait, did that actually happen? And that's how I look back at this chapter. Because how that even came about, just for the record, by the way, as I started to build my musical DNA, Bowie became the thing. He directed, he was, I was obsessed. And he was my inspiration. And, all the platitudes you can throw on David Bowie, I vigorously, believed in all of those. And I was working as a promotion assistant at Virgin, and I found out that we signed David. And I thought, oh my, after I picked myself up off the floor, I overheard, oh, in signing David, we also acquire 3 of his catalog records for. And I somehow, like, sometimes when you're young, you just have just confidence and you do things that maybe you would not do again as an adult. So when I was 24, 23 years old, and I took it upon myself to write one of the heads of the company, Nancy Berry, a letter saying, "Hey, okay, you've inherited these records, and these are all the cool bonus tracks that you can split up between the records to make the packages more exciting." And like, who am I to
Good for
recommend
you.
this to the head of the company? I don't know where that came from, but I just did it. And these were,
Good for you.
memos. So I had to print it out and put it in her, send it. There were no emails at the time on her tray. And she was in a meeting talking about the albums they were reissuing. And Michael Plen, who was my boss at the time, head of promotion, was in the meeting, and Nancy said, "Oh, well, we've got these records coming out, but there's no interesting bonus tracks, so we're just going to put them out as they are." And Michael raised his hand and, "Oh, did you not see Gizicki's memo that he slipped under your door?" And she said, "Oh, no, I must have missed that." So I got a call from the meeting. "Gizicki, bring your memo in here." So I ran into the meeting with all the executives, handed over my memo, and then left, wondering what the hell was going on. And next thing you know, she offers me a job.
That's amazing. Good for you.
She,
Yeah.
in bringing David Bowie into the fold, she realized that this was such a, yeah, as you said earlier, just significant caliber, but just heritage, and you can't screw it up. So she realized that she needed somebody in her circle that that knew everything about him and his career and could be a good point person for not just catalog stuff, but for just for his output as a whole and his interaction with the label as a whole. So I sort of started off basically managing the reissues of Let's Dance and Tonight and Never Let Me Down and the Tin Machine record. And then that evolved into me working with David personally, which was just a very surreal, insane thing. And then, he took to me, which was really weird. And we got along. And so she elevated me to the position of his product manager, being the one that was responsible for um, his career on a day-to-day basis at the label. And I was 25 years old, I think.
That's amazing. And what did he regarding new output at that time? I mean, which record did he put out during that time? Or was he
Outside was the main focus at that time.
got it?
Because after we reissued, there was a period of reissuing those particular albums, and then it was full force Outside and the tour that followed.
Okay.
So I went on tour with him for a little bit, and it was just really very.
So you're in the label fold for how many years? Because I'm trying to figure out how the transition occurs, kind of more towards your current career.
Yeah, that. So after work, I was at Virgin for a total of maybe 5 years, I think, and I was working with David for a year and a half, 2 years of that. And at a certain point, my desire to be a writer came roaring back. I don't know why. It just did. I think a lot of it was at the time. So after we successfully launched the Outside album and the tour, then I moved on to working really closely with Lenny for his Circus record, and Tina Turner for the Goldeneye song she did with U2, and then Pumpkins. I was working with, so I kind of inherited other bands, and these were all marquee bands, right? So, I was not part of developing them, or I had no creative input. I likened it at the time like I'm just shoveling coal in the furnace on the train to just keep it going. That's what I'm doing.
That's
And
the beauty of the product manager position, right?
yeah,
Because as an A&R guy, you kind of only get to work with the people you really sign and develop. And, what are the odds you're going to develop and sign 8 superstars around the world? Odds are against you. But product managers, are kind of, in a weird way, it's kind of fortunate. They get to kind of work with the creme de la creme, the highest levels. So
yeah, which is fun. And then at a certain point for me, it stopped being fun. And
why is that?
again, I just felt like I am, you know, here, I'm spending all of my time maximizing these artists' careers, but what am I doing for myself? And am I really growing here? Am I learning anything new at this point? Am I maximizing my potential? I say using air quotes. And for some reason, I thought, I want to go off and create my own art, or do my own, or sort of put my own stamp on the world somehow. And at the time, I was uh, co-publishing a music magazine called Strobe. It was all about the Silver Lake alternative music scene, and I was, sort of helping manage some bands and DJing in some clubs. So I was just kind of being that music guy about LA. And I'm like, maybe I just, I think I want to focus on being a music journalist full time. So I quit. And so I went off to be a music journalist, which I soon discovered is not the highest paying position when you're just starting out. And I was getting a lot of gigs just through people that I knew, but it was not paying the bills. So I was a music journalist for about a year, maybe. And then I literally ran out of money. Absolutely ran out of money. And I started to have parties at my apartment so that I could take the empty bottles back to the store and use that money to buy food.
Oh, man.
That's where I'd gotten.
You're an artist. You became an artist.
Yes.
You wanted to be an artist.
But but then an interesting twist of events happened. My very first boss, this woman, Jackie, that we had worked at the Virgin, had moved over to this soundtrack division at Polygram Records. And my friend said, "Oh, she's looking for a director level to come in and help her with soundtracks. You should reach out to her." So I did, and I got the job, and that is what started me on this trajectory. For me,
the
it was such a
soundtracks then at a label, just so people listening understand, were actually pretty much cash cows. At that time, as I recall.
Yeah, this is around the time of all those soundtracks like Cruel Intentions and Godzilla. All those albums that were just overblown and in Romeo and Juliet and sold a gazillion copies.
Yep, I remember.
And I look back at that and I realize, wow, my entire career came about because I checked my ego at the door and decided to just do what I needed to do, and also just to kind of maintain communication with my contacts because it was referred through a friend.
Got it. And so how long at Polygram?
I was at Polygram for a year or two, and then they were bought by Universal, and then I was laid off, and you have to learn how to bounce back. And I was laid off once Universal bought the company, and by that point, I had made enough friends in the film and TV community, music supervisors, music execs at the studios, that a few of them started hiring me to do little independent consulting jobs. And the music supervision, despite the fact that it was a cash cow at the time, as you say, those are like the label side was the cash cow. Supervisors, there still weren't all that many of us at the time. So it was, at the time, relatively easy to become friends with everybody. Also, I was younger, so I was actually going out at night and leaving the house.
Right. So you did that independently for a while, and then somehow you kind of segued into the Disney ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
And that was around home video or children's or the channel, or I can't recall. What was that?
Yeah, that one of the former music executives at Fox, Matt Walker, I became friends with, and he ended up at Disney and called me, and I just as a consultant gig on Cinderella 2, which was a direct-to-video musical. There was a sequel to Cinderella, as you can imagine. And that process went really well. So he brought me in full time as a music supervisor. So in that role, this was, it wasn't really that long ago, but the early 2000s, nobody was making musicals. They were really out of fashion. Disney feature animation had moved on and was not making musicals anymore. They were doing Chicken Little and Meet the Robinsons. You know, the days of Little Mermaid and Aladdin were long gone, and big film live action musicals didn't exist either. So we were this direct to video company that was making sequels to beloved animated classics. I worked on Disney 2 and Tarzan 2 and Mulan 2 and Cinderella 2 and 3 and Bambi 2 and we were the only people making musicals at the time. So that's how I learned. It was like boot camp, musical boot camp, really.
So then, I mean, that was a full-time job, going from a consultant to a full-time employee.
Yeah. And
did you enjoy it, or was it?
Oh, I loved it, and I can maybe admit this now, but I was not raised a Disney kid. I was raised on science fiction and horror movies, not Disney stuff. So I had to do a quick crash course because I didn't know what I don't know the Aristocats was, but boy, it was really fun, and I learned, wow, like this, because there's music supervision is a multifaceted business. No two jobs are the same, and there's sort of the side of the job that's more about picking and licensing songs, and then there's the side of the job. There's another version of the job that is what I focus on mostly, which is creating musicals. A lot of time in the studio, a lot of time with actors and dancers and whatever. And I was just fascinated and enthralled with the process of actually creating the music as opposed to finding it, and it also invigorated my writing instincts, because you become part of the storytelling process. You're sitting there with the directors and the writers and the producers, and you're figuring out how music actually makes the story work. And if we move this song over here, and if this character actually sings it, then it helps the story better than if you have it over here. Oh, and if you put this there, it really just became a very just creatively fulfilling moment.
That's great. I mean, is that
when I got laid off again?
Surprise, surprise. And then did you do more independent stuff, or did you take that jump to Lucasfilm at that point?
No, after Disney, I went independent for a while, and by that point, music supervision really had become a thing, underlined, and boy, was it competitive. So I ended up really focusing on licensing and clearances, because that helped me pay the bills.
Right.
And I struggled for years. A couple years. I just bought a house right before I got laid off from Disney, so I had to keep the house afloat and just doing any weird little odd music job I could find. And I was at the end of my rope, and like, okay, I'm gonna have to sell the house. This is it. This is just not working out. And I got a call out of nowhere from Lucasfilm, and they said, "Hey, do you want to move up to San Francisco and music supervise a film with George Lucas?" Okay.
What a terrible, terrible idea.
Yeah. You want me to be up there in 3 days? Great. I'm on the way.
Well,
I think I literally was offered the job on a Wednesday, and I started up there full time on Monday.
Wow. And which film was that?
This was the ill-fated Strange Magic.
Tell me about this Strange Magic.
It was an animated fairy tale musical that George really wanted to make, because he would say, "Look, Star Wars is for boys. I want to make something for girls." And so it was about two princesses that are sisters, and very loosely based on Midsummer Night's Dream. And at the same time, he'd say, and it was a jukebox musical made out of classic songs, because he would say, he's like, "Steve, kids today don't know who the Supremes and the Beatles are, and that's a problem. And I wanted to teach them," which to me was a really noble aspiration, because they're like really over time, thanks to streaming and being able to go on YouTube and choose whatever song you want, sometimes like the curiosity goes away, and also learning about musical history sometimes goes away, because kids aren't exposed to the Supremes maybe every day. So
were you able to license songs of that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We had pedigree.
Oh, and by the way, you call, I had Joe Myers, who's a brilliant clearance person, helping on this. You call any studio and you say, "Hey, I'm working on a musical, by George Lucas, and we want to license this Bob Marley song. Are you cool with that?" They're like, "Yeah, sure." And also, we had an unlimited budget, so so there was, uh, we had deep pockets and a great pedigree. So of course, everyone wanted to be involved. I don't know that we ever got turned down, to be totally honest.
Right. Was there score involved? That was all just these
Yes,
classic songs.
there was score, and the music director Marius DeVries, who I think you know personally, maybe.
Marius? Yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep.
he was a music producer who produced Bjork's solo material, Annie Lennox's solo material, and did a lot of work with Madonna on Ray of Light. Um, and he ended up segueing into film and was the uh, a music producer for all of the Baz Luhrmann movies, Romeo and Juliet and Moulin Rouge. So he sort of became at that time, the king of mashups and creative covers. So he was on board on Strange Magic as our executive music producer. So he and I were partners, and he was also the composer. And that relationship sort of propelled me into the next stage of my life. But it was just working on that project. I was also growing up one of those weird Star Wars kids, and to work with George so closely was just a dream, and you could ask him anything, and that job was a dream come true. And then that company got bought by Disney, and at that point, I'd moved on to being head of music for all of Lucasfilm. We weren't making a lot of output at the time, but I was working on Red Tails and this show called Star Wars Detours, and Star Wars Rebels was just getting going. And when Disney came in, they sort of looked at Strange Magic and was like, what is this? Because we were really just off doing our own thing, and it was very strange and very dark, and
How long
didn't do
did you
very well.
work on it? Just to give everyone kind of an idea.
5 years.
5
5 years.
years.
Yeah. But
And you were
I mean,
literally recording during that
yeah.
whole time.
Oh yeah, and by the way, because we kept rewriting, we went through so many drafts of that film. We kept rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. So every time we change a scene, I've got to find a new song for it, and then we have to record a new version of it and produce a new version of it. So there are, hundreds. I'm not exaggerating. Hundreds of demos and recordings of every song that you can possibly think of for this film, and we were flying all over the world to do these things, and it was really, really fun. I have to say. And we were, living. I lived in a cottage in a forest in Marin, and it was a really magical time. And the cliche that it's not the destination, it's a journey. And the um, the film wasn't very well received, but I learned so much, and I had this relationship with Marius that helped me move to the next thing. And we were talking earlier about advice, and after we finished the movie, George was such a great mentor and father figure, and really warm, and he he was really happy with the movie. And uh, I asked him, "Oh, so what do how do you think people are going to react?" And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Steve," he said, "you can't worry about that. You did a great job, and you should be proud of your work, and now we move on to the next thing. You can't be concerned about what other people think."
There you go. That's
Well,
how art is
he always would
done.
always say, "Don't read the comments, don't read the reviews."
So then Lucas gets bought, kind of blended into Disney. I'm sure that
Yeah.
made for an interesting time for you, and maybe an exit at that point when that happened.
Yeah, I got laid off again.
Well, that's an exit. So,
Yeah.
so you kind of come back from Skywalker Ranch to LA,
Yeah.
and start again as an independent music supervisor.
Yeah, that was the goal. And by the way, at that time, Strange Magic came out, and it bombed terribly. And you're sort of in this business, as in most businesses, I guess. You know, you're always as good as your last project, or people. That's how people view you, right? So, oh God, Strange Magic, and it was bombed. And I, by the way, was living in San Francisco for over 4 years. No one even remembers who I am anymore. Oh boy, what's going to happen? But very fortunately, Marius was working on a movie called LaLaLand at the time, and had been nagging, and which didn't have a music supervisor. This was 6 months out from the shoot, and Marius and I really clicked. We had a great partnership, and so he continued to bring my name up to the producers and to Lionsgate, the studio. And at a certain point, Marius just, rang me, like, "Hey, you want to come work on LaLaLand?" Like, yep. And there you go.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so when you do that, I mean, I have a million questions here, and we're going to run out of time on this one thing. But
oh wow, we're already.
So you work with Damien. I mean, is Justin Hurwitz already hired, or do you guys hire the composers?
Yeah.
Justin Hurwitz is already part of this. You bring him is in your role?
No, Justin was already on. And by the way, I'd already met Justin multiple times because while Marius and I were working on Strange Magic, Justin and Marius were developing the music for LaLaLand in the same studio. So I would come in to see Marius to do Strange Magic stuff, and Justin would be there just finishing working on LaLaLand material, and we'd cross paths. So it obviously helped. I think that I had already had a friendly relationship with Justin by seeing him, and with the producer, so they knew who I was. And Justin had been developing this material for years, along with the scripts, because he and Damien had been friends since college. So the songs, right, most of them already existed by the time that I came on board. Some were more realized than others, and some were very embryonic. But he was already out.
Got it. So tell me, how do you? So you're 6 months out from shooting.
Yeah.
With a bunch of actors, not musicians or singers. How do you get like an actors up to that level of performing music? Like, what's that take, and what's your role in that, and who else gets involved in that? I mean, that's got to be like a boot camp.
Yeah, well, oddly enough, so when I was initially brought on, I wasn't music supervisor for LaLaLand because they thought that they wouldn't need one. Like the Lionsgate music department was going to handle it, and I was brought on specifically to manage Ryan and Emma and their training and rehearsal life. And the producer of the film basically looked at me and was like, "Gizicki, this is a Trojan horse job, and it's going to turn into the music supervisor job, but just do this for now." And I obviously jumped at it, but they came to me because they knew of my history with Bowie and Lenny Kravitz and knowing how to manage talent and schedule and coordinate. So the first month or two of my job was to structure. Okay, it was to build a life for the two of them, and work with Mandy Moore, the choreographer, with Marius, our music producer, and then with Eric Beecher, who was our vocal coach. And I had to sort of build a grid of what their life was like. Right? Okay, Ryan, and there was Liz Kinnan, who was a piano teacher for Ryan. So, okay, Ryan, every day you've got 2 hours with Liz. Okay, great. Then I've got this many hours left. And then, okay, so you're with Mandy doing choreography separately for this many hours a day. Then you guys overlap for a couple hours. And then you go to see Marius, and you go to a vocal lesson. So I just had to manage that Tetris for a while to bring them up to speed. And while doing that, I also had to report back to Damien and the producers with status checkups, whether it was bringing in really rough recordings on iPhones or videos from dance rehearsal to just kind of, or piano rehearsal, just to make sure that everyone was confident that things were moving along appropriately, because everyone else in the show had plenty of other things to do, like figuring out how to get 100 cars on a freeway and dance.
So the principal actors, Emma and Ryan, are not only learning how to become singers and to play the piano, but they're actually they're having to do the choreography part too every day to get ready.
Yeah, and it really is boot camp, and they worked so hard. I really can't express. I mean, just Ryan learning piano alone, we never used a hand double. I had to hire one because even if you don't hope that you don't expect your house to burn down, but you get fire insurance anyway. So I had a hand double on deck just in case. We never used them. The guy never left his truck.
Right. And the hand double knows how to play the piano.
Yeah. He was an actual classical pianist.
Okay.
And but yeah, they just and it's so much work, and it is it musicals are I would imagine it's sort of similar to an action film where an actor has to get in shape. Hugh Jackman eats nothing but chicken breasts and works out for 6 months leading up to a Wolverine movie. And with these two actors, it's the same. They're every day. This was, I think, starting in February or March, and we didn't start shooting until July. They were just in rehearsals all day long to the point where we needed to start getting them into Pilates and massages because they were just getting broken down.
Right. And I mean, look, that's a lot of pressure in a way. Look, it's a lot of pressure
Yeah.
on them. It's pressure on you. I mean, what if you didn't get either of them to like the level they needed to be, as singers? I mean, what would have happened? I mean, is the whole thing just the tent folds and goes home, or what happens?
Well, there was studio trickery,
Right.
obviously,
Right.
but
I would
our
hope so.
goal, we had very specific goals. Though. That's part of what I do too. Is we look at the landscape of the musical and we go, okay, well, and just the shoot, like, okay, well, these here we can record live on set because if we have a controlled environment, it's in Ryan's apartment, Sebastian's apartment for City of Stars, we can record that live. Audition, we can record live because it's just her. But things like the freeway scene or someone in the crowd that are bigger and grander, those are going to be pre-records anyway. So you get them to a level where the pre-record sounds confident, but you know that you can continue to polish it and hone that all the way through post. It's really dialing in on the ones that you know are going to be live. That you record a solid pre-record anyway, just in case, because something goes wrong on the day. But you really focus more on those particular songs, and just audition was sort of, we knew that was the moment for her and for her character, and it was sort of all hands on deck getting her there. A combination of the vocal coach and Marius and all of us just um, making sure she had the support she needed, and enough time to get it right, but enough time off to rest the voice.
Right. And is a musical in general, a musical film, similar to like an action movie because pre-production and post-production maybe are more important than the actual shooting, or is that
Yeah,
not the case?
no, it's somewhat the case because there, leading up to the shoot, there was just a significant amount of rehearsal and coordination and training. Sometimes you get, coming off of In the Heights, most of the actors were really solid singers to begin with, so there wasn't too much training to do. But then you still, you need to teach everybody the songs and just drill them on it. You've got to create pre-records. You've got to, and once choreography comes into the picture, you have to, obviously make sure that the tempo of the song is appropriate for the
Right.
movement. And then there's always a back and forth involved of, oh, we need an extra 2 bars here for this person to get to the other side of the room. So can you change your track? And it takes time,
Right. And so
and
I
you
mean,
have to leave time for margin of error, right? Like, okay, well,
right.
this isn't working. And if you have to be far enough ahead of the game that if something isn't working, you do have time to reinvent it. Because otherwise, if you're late, you're behind schedule, then you just don't.
So this, I mean, did you know what this was at the time, or did your instincts go off and say, whoa, 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 this is a big deal. This is a hit.
Yes and no. We all were so convinced of the magic of the story and of Damien's storytelling ability and of the music. We knew it was something special. Whether, like, I don't know that any of us expected the world to react as enthusiastically as it did. Frankly, I personally expected, the people that love it will love it. The people that don't like it will not like it, and it'll be, maybe a moderate hit, and that it'll be that movie that people love, but maybe isn't, because there was no track record of an original musical being successful for decades.
Right.
So there's nothing to point to. Now we can point to a LaLaLand or a Greatest Showman. Back then you couldn't. So we were just crossing our fingers. But we were in Venice, and we took it to Venice for the premiere. And after the screening, and we're all just sweating bullets, and there was a standing ovation for like 8 minutes or whatever it was, and then the reviews were all pouring in, and they were just glowing, and we just were um, just stunned and
Wow.
elated.
That's a shitload of talent there. I mean, Damien has proved himself. I mean, Marius is his own genius, right? And Justin Hurwitz is obviously very talented. And then throw
Yeah,
you in the mix. So
yeah.
that's a room full of talent, man.
I
So,
just, man, I what a what a brilliant. I'm not brilliant, not the right word, but I just feel so blessed to have happened upon that film. I mean, it changed my life in every which way, you know.
yep, amazing.
Yeah.
So, and I have to ask. There's no way you're getting out of this without me asking. So, you were up on that stage at Oscar night, right? What?
Yes, yes, I
Explain.
was there.
I just gotta hear a firsthand
Yeah,
take on that moment.
well, it was um, a moment for the ages, and that's very still weird because every year around Oscar time, I get to see my shell shocked face in the newspapers and on television again. Um, it was,
You became a
we
meme.
it was very strange, very weird, very weird. I mean, I didn't expect to wake up the next day and to have my face on the cover of every newspaper in the entire world, literally, because I was standing next to Emma, so therefore I was, featured in everything. Um, it was, we obviously, it was what a high, it's such a high and then such a low. That wasn't even a low. It was just a what the. We all ran up and we're hugging each other and everything is going great, and then um, all of a sudden there were these people running around behind me, and myself and Emma and Justin Paul, I think, looked at each other like, wait, is this what's happening? Is this normal? And then the guy with the people with the walkies running around behind us, and that's when they brought the other envelope up to Warren Beatty and the producers, and you just sort of get this feeling in your stomach that something isn't right, you know, and you're standing there in front of looking at Michelle Williams and Meryl Streep in the front row, like, hello.
Was it
And
in real
what?
time or did it slow down
No,
at that
it
point?
was in this the black hole of everything happening at once, and what I don't know that what you can't see on television is Jordan Horowitz, one of our producers, who's the one that held up the envelope or the card. He actually, like, I just can't believe that he had the sense and the strength and the maturity he actually turned to us first and said, guys, there's been a mistake. We didn't win. It's not us. And which is such a sign of like what an amazing sign of an amazing producer. That's your responsibility first and foremost. It's to your crew. It's your team. And he turned around and told us first, and then he spun around to the crowd and held the card up.
Mm. Wow.
And meanwhile, by the way, of course, two producers had given their acceptance speeches, and Moonlight comes up, and we were friends with the Moonlight people. There was no rivalry because we'd been doing the film festival circuit with them for 6 months, so they were our friends. And it's a beautiful movie.
It
And
is.
but then we're just standing there like, okay, what do we do now? So we all just kind of like just shuffled sideways off the stage to just get out of the camera range.
Incredible. So,
And it was just weird, and it was upsetting for the producers who worked so hard, and for it to have been kind of it was a very weird moment for everybody, and everybody reacted differently. There's that footage of Ryan giggling.
yes.
And some people were really shell shocked and upset, and just numb. And, you sort of don't know how to feel afterwards, right?
What a cluster. It was surreal.
Yeah,
Because at
yeah,
home watching it, you couldn't really tell. It's like, is this a put on? Like, is this
yeah.
like, is this like the final like joke they're having at all of our expenses? I mean, what is this? So you worked like towards last year and stuff. You were working with Lin-Manuel Miranda on In the Heights film. Is that the next kind
Yeah,
of
well,
thing you
in
can?
in between that, I worked on Teen Spirit, Max Minghell's
Right.
film in London, and I did animated movie small for Warner Brothers. And during
When
that
did you
period,
do
I'd
the
worked.
Fosse? When did you do the Fosse Verdon?
That was 2019.
Okay. And you got an Emmy
Actually,
nomination for that,
yeah,
right?
yeah, which is really, that was amazing. I mean, God, how crazy is that? And that project was so fun because that is part of what led to In the Heights, but more what actually proved to be the catalyst for In the Heights more than anything really is after La La Land had come out, John Chu was shooting Crazy Rich Asians in Singapore and Malaysia, and suddenly they had a few on-camera music moments, more than were expected, I guess. And the music supervisor couldn't travel, and I'm friends with the Warner Brothers music department, and John's like, "Oh, look, I need somebody there to manage these," and the Warner Brothers music department said, "Oh, well, we can send Steve. He did La La Land," and John's like, "Yeah, fine, great." And so through jetting off to Singapore for a month, which is pretty spectacular, it established a relationship with John, and then I ended up working on Fosse Verdon with Alex Lacamoire, Lin's music director, and also with Lin. And so the combination of all those events led to me just sort of being, seeming to be the natural choice for In the Heights. And I La La Land was really special, especially for all sorts of reasons. And it was lightning in the bottle. And we all work on these things in our lifetime. Like, I that was a really great moment. I'm putting it on the shelf because nothing will ever replicate that, right? And while making In the Heights, we were in pre-production. I left a recording session with John Chu, and we were talking, and we sort of looked at each other like, "Do you feel this? Is it just me?" And he laughed, and I burst into tears on 47th Street because I suddenly it hit me that La La Land wasn't my only, like something else magical was happening, and I just felt so blessed, so lucky to be to have such an incredible experience more than once in my life.
Right. Well, the intersection of all this stuff is it's just, and this is kind of what I'm trying to get to with this podcast is like, the momentum, right? And I don't even know how to explain it. I mean, it's years of work, right? And then it just
Yeah.
happens and it looks like a tidal wave.
I've been doing this for 20
minute.
years. Yeah, I've been doing it for 20 years. I am a 20-year overnight sensation.
Right, but you see why people think things are overnight successes, though.
Yeah.
It's like all these little strands of DNA connect at one point, and it just blows up. And
I wouldn't be here without working on Bambi 2. I wouldn't be here without having, gotten, laid off from that and being forced to do this and taking weird jobs doing music licensing because then that led to this. And it's all tools that you put in your toolkit and people that you meet along the way. I met Marius at Strange Magic, which is not a successful movie, but what a successful creative experience it was.
Amazing. And I mean, Lin-Manuel Miranda is truly a genius, right? I mean, he's got more talent, in his pinky than I have my whole entire body, and he's just a genius, right?
Yeah, he's really just. I mean, you want to say a national treasure, but it's a worldwide treasure. He's really just warm, and apart from just being a genius and writing such amazing songs, he's giving and collaborative and supportive and nurturing. It's really something. And he's directing Tick Tick Boom now. Well, not now. Now we're on pause. But he's this is his first time officially directing anything, and he's just, as you would imagine, just taken to it.
Yeah, I'm in awe of him. He's high on my pedestal of idols. So
well, it's just there's that thing that people have, and it's just he can be fast too. Like we needed to write one new little there's some stuff that needed to be reworked for In the Heights, and I've been badgering him about it. And he left. We were in a recording studio, and he went outside to the couch area for a few minutes and came back, and he's like, "Oh, I just did it, and I just emailed it to you." Like, how does that happen? Like, how do you reconstruct an entire song? Well, I thought you were just in the restroom. I mean, it's
amazing.
I'm here eating a pita sandwich, and you've just.
So we're getting close here. I'm gonna try to close this out. So on the Tick Tick Boom, I mean, this is a little bit of it's a Jonathan Larson musical that he wrote? I mean, it's somewhat self-biographical or not, or
Yeah, for those of you at home that aren't familiar, Jonathan Larson, who wrote the musical Rent, this was his musical that he wrote before Rent, and it was very off Broadway at the time. Later revived with Lin starring in it. By the way, that was one of
oh,
Lin's
he
first,
did. Oh,
one of
wow.
his first gigs, which is why he has such a close affection to the project. And it's very autobiographical. The lead was the show by Jonathan Larson starring a character named Jonathan. And it's about a musical theater writer who just is struggling to write his musical and just has hit a block. And it's him and his relationship that's falling apart because he can't make anything work. So it's about the creative process. It's about friendships. It's about love, and it's about the never ending struggle of an artist. And I'm not spoiling it because the show is the show. Like it's also about like, okay, great, you've done this one thing. What's next? It's about not resting on laurels and always having to just keep pushing, and moving forward.
That's great. Yeah, I remember from my New York years, always hanging out at Don Hill's down there in, at Spring Street, a club, Spring Street in Greenwich. And Jonathan was around then, so it was a little bit of I don't know, a little buzz on him because he'd hang around at Don Hill's. But sadly taken from us early and definitely very talented. So,
And it's been such a great experience working with his family because they're very involved in this, and he has uh, essentially a librarian that keeps all of his archives together. So digging through all of his archives for just listening to material that never saw the light of day. It's really special, but also such a shame.
right. So is all the material the same as he did it? I mean, are you enhancing things? Is anything being updated? Is it
Yeah, I
as it
mean
was written?
it's 2020, and the show was 12 years ago.
Early 90s? When was
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it has to be updated to a point, but the film is a period piece in the 90s. So it's somewhat updated, but also it's different because when you're as with anything that goes from stage to screen, on stage you have there are limits to what your pit orchestra can be, how many players you can have, how much pre-recorded material you can use for union reasons. So when you transport it to the screen, you can do anything. I mean, for
Mm,
In the Heights, for example, these every song just goes up to the next level because now we can have we can have go have a hip hop producer contribute, and it just can become just really contemporary and crazy. And for Tick Tick Boom, we just we can function in more of a lot of these are sort of are pop rock songs at their core, and not being constrained by a pit orchestra and that sound, like we can make them sound more like radio songs of the era.
right. Hmm. I can't wait for
Yeah,
both of them actually. So,
yeah. Well,
and
In the Heights
I
a
don't
year
do
from now, Tick Tick
musicals.
Boom, I don't
So,
know. Well, there's a lot of yeah. Do you fall on that side of the spectrum? You're not a musical fan?
I am not. I have to say I'm one of those rare birds that doesn't quite get them, even though I've seen a few of the rock ones, right? Like We Will Rock You and American Idiot. Um, so, but in general, something that's not an edgy kind of thing, as a musical, I wouldn't be a fan of. But
There's something for everyone.
these are
There's always
different.
a Hedwig, So
Yeah,
um,
there is.
I
So,
I just love it because it's such a I guess I love functioning in non-reality. Maybe I mean there's just something just transporting about characters that break into song. And I work in music, so if I live being on set all day and you're just around all these people singing and dancing, how great is that? You know, um, it's part of the fantastical um, nature of movie making. It's next level magic.
Visual and music together, man. It's otherworldly, really, and the best people make it that way. And anyway,
that's one of my favorite
Go
Oscar
ahead.
clips are always that, when those clips where people put the wrong music under iconic movie scenes just to show to demonstrate how different it would be.
Yep.
And I love those montages.
Yep. It's great. So listen, a lot to cover. I look forward to COVID ending so that you and I can maybe finish up on some of these projects once they're kind of finished, and talk about those. But I'm really grateful that you made time today. And I mean, it's been fascinating, man. And your last 10 years have been really remarkable. So,
well, it, as we said, it took another 10 years before that to get there, and right. I have to always be so appreciative and grateful. And also I also love what I do, God, I don't know what else I would do if this didn't exist.
Well, that's what it takes to get over these hurdles.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for making time, Steve. Stay healthy. I hope one day I'll see you in person.
I hope so too.
And thanks for doing this.
Thank you. You're ever so welcome.
Well, that's our show this week. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe even learned a little something. To follow what's going on with this podcast, you can go to theradicalpod.com. Theradicalpod.com. You'll find show notes and past episodes, and even a little swag there if you want a t-shirt or a hat. Also, I would be honored if you'd subscribe at Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Till next week.